So, with the latest Doctor Who episode released, this point in time being Lux, introducing a new member of the Pantheon, Lux, I felt it probably wise to give you a bit of an update on, well, a bit of a history of the gods in Doctor Who, otherwise known as the Pantheon of Gods, the Gods of Chaos, or the Pantheon of Discord. And I think the easiest way to go about kind of describing each of the gods is to go through them one by one, going off the list that Harriet Arbinger ultimately gave in The Legend of Ruby Sunday, because I feel that's the kind of easiest way to go through them. Now, technically the oldest of the gods we've actually seen on screen was the Toymaker, who is the god of games. Although actually, before I should start, the Pantheon of Discord, they mainly serve as kind of godlike beings or celestial beings who seek to cause chaos, with each of them championing a different part of, well, a kind of different element. As I said, the Toymaker is the god of games. Now, previously, as I said, the Celestial Toymaker is probably the oldest of the gods to appear on screen, appearing back in 1966 in the first Doctor serial, The Celestial Toymaker, where he was played by actor Michael Gough, where he essentially forced the Doctor to play an extended Time Lord game, while he forced his companions Stephen Taylor and Dodo Chaplet to take part in multiple deadly games against multiple deadly characters, including kind of a particularly round boy, I think his name was Cecil, I can't remember, who kind of made them play games where they could die from making the wrong move, and even bring to life a set of playing cards. Now, the Toymaker for a while after that wouldn't appear on screen. He was actually due to appear in a 1980s story titled The Nightmare Fair, where he would have faced off against the Sixth Doctor and his companion Perry. However, this story was ultimately never made. However, it would later be released as part of the Big Finish Lost Stories, The Nightmare Fair, where the Toymaker would be voiced by actor David Bailey. However, in 2023, well, technically I think 2022 is when they filmed it, but in 2023, the Toymaker was finally brought back for the 60th anniversary story, The Giggle, where it was played by actor Neil Patrick Harris, and proved himself to be just as dangerous as ever, before the 14th and 15th Doctors are able to banish him by winning his game of catch. So, as I said, the Toymaker is probably one of the oldest ones, and his ability to kind of manipulate reality into his games makes him quite frightening. And as he said in his speech to the Doctor, I took kind of galaxies and turned them into spinning tops. I gambled with God and made him a jack-in-the-box. Made a jigsaw out of your history. Did you like it? And even saying he beat the Master by stealing inside his gold tooth. Even one player he didn't dare face. But we'll get to that one later. Now, while the Toymaker might be the oldest member of the Pantheon to appear on screen, the longest serving, in terms of one we're probably all most familiar with, is the Trickster. Now, the Trickster hasn't actually appeared in Doctor Who. We have met his minions, like the Grask, who appeared in stuff like Attack of the Grask and Music of the Spheres. And we have met the Time Beetle from Turn Left, but the place where the Trickster was the most prominent was in the spin-off The Sarah Jane Adventures, where he made 3 appearances from Series 1 to Series 3, appearing in the story 2007's Whatever Happened to Sarah Jane, where he ended up extracting Sarah Jane from her timeline and replacing her with her childhood friend Andrea Yates, thus kind of changing history in order to make certain events happen, and ultimately cause a meteorite to hit the Earth without Sarah Jane there to stop it, in order of causing chaos. He returned the following year in 2008 to The Temptation of Sarah Jane Smith, where he, working along with the Grask, he ends up showing Sarah Jane a time portal back to the 1950s when her parents are alive, specifically the day her parents are due to die, in which he is able to manipulate Sarah Jane into braking her parents' car, so that way they can't drive off and get into a car accident, but in doing so, that allows the Trickster to break through into our reality, manifest himself, and ultimately can become ruler of the new reality, before Sarah Jane and her group are able to stop them. He would make a final appearance in 2009's The Wedding of Sarah Jane Smith, where he ends up manipulating events so that Sarah Jane falls in love with a man named Peter Dalton. And because Peter was actually supposed to die in an accident, he is able to manipulate the two in some quite heartbreaking scenes. If Sarah Jane ends up marrying Peter, then the two of them will ultimately start a new life together, forgetting about her old life, protecting the Earth, and thus causing chaos, allowing aliens to just barge in. Now, the Trickster was actually due to appear one final time, or at least another time in the Sarah Jane Adventures, in what was originally slated to be the final story of Series 5, The Battle for Bannerman Road, which would have taken place in 2011. The idea for that story was supposedly going to be that he'd manipulated events to make sure that Sarah Jane's new adopted daughter Skye had ended up with her. He would then activate Skye, causing her to attack Sarah Jane, and would then go about a process of transforming Sarah Jane's attic into a tower from which he could take over the world. Eventually he would be defeated and Skye would have guarded his prison. Now, unfortunately, this story was never made due to the sudden death of Elizabeth Sladen in 2011. But moving on, next up we have Maestro, a child of the Trickster and the god of music. Now, compared to the other two, Maestro is fairly new. Played by Jinx Monsoon, he appeared in the 2024 Series 14 episode, or Season 1, The Devil's Court, where he does prove his ability over music turns out to be quite frightening. Even when the Doctor and Ruby try to travel back to 2024 to see that everything's going to be okay, it turns out without music, we as humanity went to war over quite a variety of things, and eventually we reduced it to a wasteland. Before ultimately the two members of the Beatles were able to find the necessary chords to banish Maestro from reality. Anyway, the next one that we have met that Harriet mentions is the Mara, the god of beasts. Now, the Doctor has actually met the Mara twice. Once in 1982's Kinder, and then again in 1983's Snake Dance. Basically a large snake-like being with seemingly the ability to change its shape, change its appearance, and also low levels of mind control, which it mainly uses against the Doctor's companion Tegan in quite some horrifying scenes. Now, the next one, it's really a question of whether this one should count, because I don't think it's actually been confirmed this is actually a member of the Pantheon, but fans have kind of speculated that this could be a member, so I'll say it. The threefold deity of malice, mischief, and misery. Fans have speculated for a long time that the Doctor has actually encountered this particular god before in the 1988 story, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, being encountered by the Seventh Doctor and Ace. I believe that this god is presented as the gods of Ragnarok in that story, to which I can kind of see what they mean, forcing the Doctor and various other people to entertain them in return for not destroying reality. This isn't actually confirmed that this is them, but I'd say it's a fair theory. But of course, next up is the god of death, Sutekh, to which the Doctor has encountered this being before. It depends on how exactly it's portrayed. It's either like a huge dog-like creature, or it's kind of a humanoid with a large kind of mask over the front of it with glowing green eyes. The Doctor has encountered Sutekh twice, although you could argue more than that. He made his debut in 1975's Fourth Doctor story, The Pyramids of Mars, where he's aiming to kind of manipulate events to destroy his prison on Mars and ultimately escape. Now, while he wouldn't return again on screen until The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death in 2024, you could argue he has actually appeared more than that. In the Doctor Who Titan comics for the 10th Doctor, the 10th Doctor and his companions Gabby Gonzalez and Cindy Wu end up encountering a descendant of Sutekh named Anubis, and later Sutekh himself in the stories The Fountains of Forever and War of Gods. To which I would suggest checking out the Doctor Who Titan comics, because I find them really enjoyable. I know they're not to everyone's taste, but I would say they're worth a read. Of course, Sutek's grand plan first time around in the Pyramids of Mars was just to escape his prison. However, come the Legend of Ruby Sunday, he's voiced by the same guy, and this time he aims to kind of do what effectively Thanos did in Infinity War. Basically bring death to all of time, all of the places the Doctor has visited across time and space, ultimately send a cloud of death and wipe out all life in the universe. Quite sinister. And then, of course, we have the latest member, Lux Imperator, voiced by Alan Cumming in the latest episode, Lux. To which, check out my review on that if you want a full scope of that. But those actually aren't the only members of the Pantheon of Discord. Those are the only ones we actually met, or supposedly met. But others who Harriet mentions in the story are, there's Reprobate, the god of spite. Oh, Lord knows what they look like. There's Incensor, the god of disaster, and her children, Doubt and Dread. Honestly, they sound quite sinister. And then she also mentions others that don't actually have names, or names that we don't know about yet. Gods of skin, gods of shame, and gods of secrets. So Doctor Who is going in a position or a direction now where we'll get to see more of the gods and more of the Pantheon of Discord. I'm up for it. Although, one last thing before I sign off on this video. I could be wrong about this, but I believe the first time they were actually referred to as the Pantheon of Discord is in The Wedding of Sarah Jane Smith in 2009. When the Doctor, Luke, Clyde and Rani and K9 are kind of investigating the kind of front hall of the wedding venue, Clyde mentions that they've fought the Trickster before, but they've never actually known who he is, found out who he is. To which the Doctor replies, the Trickster is a creature from beyond the universe, forever trying to break his way into our reality to manifest himself. He's one of the Pantheon of Discord. That's a good name for a band. Actually, not bad, yeah. I believe that's the first time they're actually referred to as the Pantheon of Discord, but considering how frightening the Pantheon has been so far, with the Toymaker, the Trickster, Maestro, the Mara, the threefold deity, Sutek and Lux, can't wait to see what they got coming up, and presumably we'll either get to meet a new member of the Pantheon or another member with the finale of Series 15, Wishworld and the Reality War. At least that's what I'm assuming at this point. Until then, we'll have to wait and see what the Pantheon has in store. Until then, see ya.